Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the red Gallantmon starter deck, and previously in another video I showed off one way you could build and upgrade the deck to double down and incentivize you to play Gallantmon the way he wants to be played, but in that starter deck also came with a fantastic supporting mega that actually could be spun and made into his own deck, and that's going to be the shinegreymon in the starter deck. So this version of shinegreymon is an absolutely fantastic Digimon that we could include with the Greymon tribal package and engine that we currently got in BT-05, and with some of the new starter deck cards, we can make this shinegreymon and a Greymon tribal deck stronger than it's ever been before. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Bebydomon. So Bebydomon is the best Digitama that we have to be working with in this style of deck because he is a DP boost Digimon that's interacting with the piercing ability, and he's giving our piercing Digimon plus 2000 DP. So this is just the best generic way we could give our Digimon lots of DP, so that way they could hit into the opponent's security as hard as they possibly can, and that's kind of the goal of what the Greymon tribal deck is trying to do, is hit the opponent's security as hard as they possibly can. So having as much DP as possible just makes your Digimon even safer checking through multiple security checks. And then the 5th Digitama of the deck could really be anything you want it to be. I feel like Koromon from BT-05 is still a very fantastic Digimon just because it's acting as a good card draw engine for the deck, where it has this nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, if this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then we get to draw 1 card. So the only unfortunate part about this card is we do have to swing with our lower level Greymons in order to get more value out of this card, because otherwise we're swinging with our mega level Digimon, and by that point we're trying to win the game. So I feel like the card draw isn't as important, but it's still nice to have for when we need it. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT-01 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good because he is going to be acting as the dedicated Tamer digger. So we are going to be playing a couple of different Tamers in the deck, and we want to ensure that we want to try to find the ones that we need when we need it, and Agumon helps us accomplish that task by checking the top 5, adding 1 Tamer card among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom, so that way we have a way to try to find them. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT-05 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is going to be our Greymon digger card. So we're using this card similar to the BT-01 Agumon, except this is going to be helping us find our Greymons and Omnimons, so that way we could try to make it as powerful and consistent of plays as we possibly can, with his on-play ability to reveal the top 3, add 1 Digimon with Greymon in its name and 1 Digimon with Omnimon in its name from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So instead of checking the top 5, it's checking the top 3, but we have more potential targets running lots of varied Greymons in the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the first starter deck version of Agumon, and this Agumon is in the deck just because he is DP boosting our higher levels, and that's really all we care about. If you wanted to, you could run the promo Agumon instead of this, but I feel like this Agumon is still really good just because it's a generic 1000 boost during our turn as a good inheritable. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Agumon. So this version of Agumon is the new version that came out in the Gallantmon starter deck, and this Agumon is really good, again, at accomplishing the goal of DP boosting our Digimon, so that way they're as powerful as we could possibly make it. So he has the nice inheritable ability of when this Digimon's attacking a player, so when we're attacking into their security, then our Digimon is going to get plus 2000 DP for the turn, so we combine this with Bebydomon, and we're by default attacking into their security, giving them a plus 4000 boost, which is really, really important because that just makes our Digimon live through those security checks even easier. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT-05 version of Greymon, and this Greymon is really good because he has this nice when Digivolving ability native to him, where if he's Digivolving on top of an Agumon, well, all of our rookies are Agumons, then we get to gain 1 memory. So just for digivolving into this Greymon means he's essentially costing 1 to evo instead of 2 to evo. You do have to be careful of their memory blockers that will stop this card, but regardless, just having a card to digivolve into on top of our Agumons for even more tempo efficiency is always a good thing, especially with his inheritable ability, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP, thus doubling down on how much DP we could give our Digimon to ensure their safety when swinging into the security. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Monochromon. So Monochromon is going to be the deck's dedicated blocker. It's still important to have some form of defense in the deck, just so that way we don't blow ourselves out. And then Monochromon is a really good card because he's also a tempo efficiency card, evoing for 1, so that way it's easy to digivolve into him and past him, even though he's not really benefiting the deck in any way, shape, or form. Having a blocker is still just nice, and it is a little bit unfortunate that he only has 5000 DP, making him a slightly weaker blocker, but that's okay because half the time we're going to be using him for that tempo and efficiency. But if you do feel like you want to run Volcdramon just as the dedicated blocker of the slot, just to have a stickier or more powerful blocker, then by all means do so. It doesn't really matter, this is just the blocker slot for the deck. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the starter deck version of Greymon, and this Greymon is still fantastic just because he has the nice inheritable ability where this Digimon gains security attack +1. So that's really important because this is just what we're going to be using to try to hit the opponent's security as hard as we possibly can. So having multiple instances of security attack +1 all stacking on top of each other just makes it for a very easy and very powerful punch onto their security. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Volcdramon. So Volcdramon, for all intents and purposes, is just a level 5 version of the starter deck Greymon. We really only care about the inheritable ability that he gives of just generic security attack +1, so that way we could stack them up to have multiple instances of security attack plus to just punch the opponent's security as hard as we possibly can. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of MetalGreymon Alterous mode. So MetalGreymon Alterous mode is another very powerful card to be running in the deck, just because he has lots of different ways we could play him. We could play him just as a solid MetalGreymon to use for his inheritable ability, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then the Digimon will get plus 2000 DP for some even more DP boosting. We could use him in combination with himself just because he could evo on top of a level 5 for 1, so that way we could even potentially swing early with Alterous mode and hit the security as hard as we possibly can with everything underneath him, just because he also has the added benefit where when we're digivolving on top of a card with MetalGreymon in its name, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, so he even acts as some removal for allowing us to digivolve him on top of himself to allow us to swing and hit really hard relatively early, acting as almost a pseudo-mega. And then as far as the megas of the deck go, I'm going to be running 3 copies of BlitzGreymon. So BlitzGreymon is a very powerful level 6 to be using just because he has the piercing ability, so that allows us to use Bebydomon and not really worry about not getting its buffs, just because our megas both have piercing. And then on top of that, he's also adding some extra removal elements into the deck because he has this nice when digivolving ability of Digivolve 2 on one of the opponent's Digimon, thus shrinking them down to a weaker version, forcing them to try to climb back up if they can, or if they can't, then they're stuck with the weaker Digimon. So we could figure out ways to either ignore it or deal with it in various different forms of removal. So BlitzGreymon is just very powerful for those different purposes, on top of him being a Greymon for all of our Greymon synergies. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of shinegreymon. So shinegreymon is an absolutely fantastic card for this deck to be playing with, just because he has 2 very powerful keywords. His first keyword is security attack +1, so that way he just naturally is going to deal 2 damage himself. So if we stack in Volcdramon and Greymon, he could hit for 4 security, and then with our Tamer, he could hit for a 5th security. So it's just a very easy way to hit for all 5 of the opponent's security, on top of the fact that he has piercing. So this allows us to use Bebydomon to gain some good DP boosting, so that way he can hit for at least a minimum of 14 if we do just have a really weird or awkward stack, which is still pretty strong. And the piercing ability, paired up with security tech +1, ensures we're always going to be dealing damage, just because if they do block him, then we still get the security damage because of the piercing ability. So this is just what's creating this very powerful synergy where we could easily and efficiently hit the opponent's security as hard as we possibly can. And then the last mega and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon. So this is the BT-05 Omnimon, and we're just using this card as a game finisher. So he has the when Digivolving ability to unsuspend this Digimon, and another when Digivolving ability to gain Blitz, so that way we could attack with him even if the memory passes over onto the opponent's turn. So the whole idea is we're just going to have shinegreymon punch the opponent's security, break all of its security, then Digivolve into Blitz Omni, and then swing for game. So that's really the only real reason why we're playing Omnimon, and he's still just a really good card. Even if we're unable to close out the game, he could still provide lots of pressure onto the opponent because a lot of our buffs do carry over to him, and he also has this nice ability where during all turns, if an opponent would delete this Digimon or return him to the hand or bottom of the deck, then we could prevent him from leaving the field by trashing a level 6 Digimon underneath, acting as some form of protection in case we do just need to Digivolve up into him to just try to have a stronger Digimon on the field, making it harder for the opponent to deal with. Next, onto the options, I'm only going to be running 2 copies of Red Memory Boost. So Red Memory Boost is just a solid consistency card for the deck to be using because we get to check the top 4 cards of our deck, add 1 red Digimon among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So again, just digging for more consistency, the fact that it could hit any red Digimon is really valuable. We're only running just a small handful of white cards, so it's not like it's going to be that big of a hindrance. We're just looking for our red Digimon to try to continue our natural flow of gameplay. And then on top of that, it has the nice main ability of delay, so after we use its first main ability, it'll just sit in the battle area, so we could use its second main ability at a later turn to just gain 2 memory to make very powerful follow-up plays happen when we need the extra memory. Next, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Tai Kamiya. So Tai Kamiya from BT-01 is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer, so if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just hard set it to 3, trying to make our plays as efficient as we can possibly make them because of this. And on top of that, he also has the nice added benefit where all of our red Digimon with 4 or more Digivolution sources in them gain security tech +1, allowing our shinegreymon and BlitzGreymon to try to hit for even more security, and we could even possibly use this with MetalGreymon Alterous mode, just because he could Digivolve on top of himself, so that way we could try to aggress with that card as well. So there's just a lot of different ways we could use it, this Tamer, making him just the best Tamer that we have access to. But to complement Tai Kamiya, the last Tamer of the deck is going to be Nokia. So Nokia is actually a pretty important Tamer for this deck to run, just because it allows us to play our Agumons relatively efficiently, because if we're just playing our Agumon, we could just play it off of Nokia. So Nokia's on-playability, allowing us to play 1 Agumon from our hand, is just really good because we have lots of on-playabilities we could trigger with our Agumons, or just get an Agumon on the field. And then its other ability is probably the more important ability, where when we Digivolve one of our Digimon from our hand with Koromon, Omnimon, or Greymon in its name, then we could suspend her to reduce the memory cost of that evolution by 1, making our Digimon even more efficient to Digivolve into. So the more Nokias we have, the more instances of this ability we have to reduce our evolutions. So this pairs very nicely with our memory fixing Tamer Tai, so that way we could set ourselves up to 3, and then we could, with Nokia, be able to Digivolve into Blitz and Shine and not pass the turn. Even at worst with Tai, we could set up a red memory boost to go up to 5 memory, so that way we could still Digivolve without Nokia, but Nokia being there only helps the deck flow and function just because we could use her for multiple different stages of our Digimon. And then there's still just a whole bunch of customization you could do even with this simple concept and theme, just because there's a whole bunch of Greymons that we could be playing around with. So if we wanted a different Digitama, then Bebydomon is just another way to generically gain us some DP for doing something very similar to what we're already doing. So Bebydomon is really good for that. Then, as I mentioned before, we do have the promo Agumon to be working with. Either of the promo Agumons work with the deck, just because we could use Nokia to hard play the 5-1, to delete a low-level Digimon, or we could use the Agumon to just DP boost our Greymons by 2000 DP versus a generic 1000 DP, so we have different options in terms of other cards we could use to spice up the deck. Then if we want even more DP boosting, we could even consider running the BT-01 Greymon, just because it's another generic plus 2000 DP if we're that concerned about our DP. Then we also have Agumon as a game finisher, just because we're using him like Blue uses Lobomon to Digivolve on top of our red Tamer, so that way we could swing for game when all of the opponent's security is gone, acting as an additional surprise attack. But speaking of surprises, we also have security Digimon we could even consider playing with that are also in the Greymon line. So Greymon is absolutely fantastic just because he's adding some extra removal elements with his on-play ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less on top of his security ability, and we even have more MetalGreymons to play with if we want to double down on Alterous mode, just because we have the BT-01 MetalGreymon to give plus 3000 DP. And we have the starter deck MetalGreymon to make it so when our Digimon is blocked, which hopefully they won't be, so it's acting as a de-incentivization tool, but if they are ever blocked, then we'll gain 3 memory, which we could then make very powerful follow-up plays with. Then we do have some other Rise Greymons in the deck, so we could use the BT-04 Rise Greymon for his Digiburst ability to try or play our ties more efficiently, but unfortunately we can't play our Nokias off of this, so that's kind of like the drawback to running this card. And then on top of that, the when attacking inheritable ability isn't super useful, so I'm not like thrilled with the card, but it's just a good way to try to play our ties, which is the only reason why we'd ever run him. And then if we do just want to hard slam a level 5 on the field to just Digivolve into an easy level 6 to start applying lots of pressure relatively early and quickly, then we do have the starter deck Rise Greymon for his on-play ability to delete a 5000 DP or less Digimon, which could be a blocker or some of their champions just sitting on the field. Then we do have a couple of other megas that we could run in the deck, so if you wanted to, you could run the BT-01 War Greymon, just because he could give himself security attack +1, and on top of that, he also has the native ability to turn off the opponent's options in their security, which is just very powerful, making our swings very, very safe. So we have lots of ways to Digivolve up into him, lots of ways to give him good DP, and the fact that this buff actually would carry over to our Omnimon in case we can't finish off the opponent's security with this card means that there's just a lot of different ways we could use him. And then we even have the starter deck Greymon if we just want to double down and focus on the more one-punchy aspect of what Red's doing, just because he could give himself lots of additional security attacks on top of all of the security attacks we could give him. So he's just another really good card we could play on top of Nokia being able to reduce his Digivolution cost from 4 to 3 or even more, so we can make him even more efficient to be playing around with. Then we do have a whole bunch of other Omnimons that we could be running. So we could run X Antibody, we could run the OG Omnimon, we could run Alterous, and if you do run Alterous, then we do have the MetalGreymon that could grab back Alterous. So there's just a lot of different ways that you could approach your level 7 slot depending on how you want to build the deck. Then we do have some other very powerful option cards to be running, like a Delicate Plan to act as the BT-01 Greymon to turn off the opponent's options when we hit them in the security. And we even have other Tamers that we could consider running, even though I don't think the other Tamers are going to be as efficient as what Tai is doing. There's still decent Tamers to run nonetheless and think about, just because Marcus interacts with Greymons by allowing us to gain a memory back when we're attacking with one of our Greymons by suspending the Tamer, and he's a memory fixing Tamer, so if you don't have Tais, then Marcus is a good substitute. And if you want to double down on more Omnimon based strategies, then we even have Matt and Tai to just give our Omnimon security attack +1, so we still have lots of ways to deal lots of damage onto the opponent, and he's a duo Tamer, so for the opponent having a level 6 Digimon or higher in play, we'll just gain 2 memory a single turn, and we don't necessarily care about the opponent's board as much, just because we're trying to one-punch them and to basically kill them in 1 turn. But if you are concerned about the opponent's field and you do feel like you need to run removal options, we have a whole slew of very powerful removal options. Trident Revolver is good to try to play our Tamers and delete 6,000 or less. Transcendent Sword is basically a mini Gaia Force where it's 11,000, and then if we have a Greymon or Omnimon in play, then it's up to 15,000 or less. Then we have Red Reamer to delete one that's 6,000 for even cheaper than Trident Revolver, and if the opponent has 3 or more Digimon, then it's 13,000 or less, just again, more solid removal. And on top of that, we even have Gaia Force to act as one of the best removal options in the game, on top of Atomic Blaster, that both come from the starter deck, and they're both very good in their own rights. But for the most part, it's just a Greymon Tribal or Greymon Synergy deck, where we're just trying to utilize our Greymons and Agumons to their utmost potential, and the fact that the starter deck gave us a couple of new cards to be playing around with just make the deck even better than it was before, acting as another way to spin off the deck depending on what you want to gain out of the deck, just because we have two viable megas that we could play and to build two possible decks, all thanks to what the Gallantmon starter deck is providing. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.